In a quiet little town in Texas where everyone knew each other's business, whispers started flying around when word got out that Norris was joining the local karate dojo. Now, if you're wondering why this felt like such big news, it's because Danielle wasn't just any ordinary teenager. She was the daughter of Chuck Norris, the legendary martial artist whose name alone could make people sit up straight. But while her last name carried weight in the world of fighting, not everyone welcomed her arrival with open arms. Danielle had grown up surrounded by martial arts. Her dad didn't just teach her how to throw punches. He taught her discipline, respect, and humility. She'd spent years mastering Taekwondo under his watchful eye, but now at 17 she wanted to push herself further. So she decided to step into the world of Shotokan karate, a style she hadn't trained in before, and signed up for classes at the nearby dojo. On her very first day, Danielle walked into the dojo wearing a crisp white gi, her hair neatly tied back. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward her. Some students looked curious, others skeptical, but one guy stood out more than the rest. Let's call him Jake. Jake was known for being cocky, always flexing his muscles and boasting about how good he was. He wasn't exactly popular, but no one dared challenge him either. "Oh, great," Jake muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Another celebrity kid who thinks they're special." His comment drew laughter from some of the younger kids while others shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Danielle didn't react. Instead, she bowed respectfully to the instructor and took her place among the group. But Jake wasn't done yet. During warm-ups, he mocked her every move, calling her stances Hollywood karate and questioning if she even deserved to be there. When she remained calm and focused, his insults grew louder. "Bet your daddy paid someone to give you those belts," he sneered, earning more snickers from his buddies. By now, the tension in the room was thick. A few students glanced nervously at Coach Harris, the head instructor, hoping he'd step in, and finally, he did. Clapping his hands sharply, Coach Harris called everyone to attention. "All right, settle down," he barked, his voice firm but fair. Turning to Danielle, he gave her an apologetic smile. "Don't mind him, Danny. Let's see what you got." The moment hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew what was coming next. A test. Whether it was meant to prove something to Jake or simply to gauge Danielle's skill, no one was sure. But one thing was certain. Whatever happened next would leave a lasting impression on everyone in that room. As the class lined up for sparring practice, Danielle kept her cool. She didn't let Jake's words get to her. After all, she hadn't come here to win popularity contests. She came to learn, grow, and earn respect, not because of her famous father, but because of her own hard work. Little did anyone know, including Jake, that within minutes, everything was about to change. Coach Harris wasted no time. He called Danielle and Jake to the center of the dojo, where the mat stretched out like a blank canvas waiting for action. The room grew eerily quiet as everyone stopped what they were doing to watch. Some students sat cross-legged on the sidelines, others leaned against the walls, but all eyes were glued to the pair standing face to face. "All right," Coach Harris said, his tone firm yet calm. "We're going to do a little sparring match. No full contact, just controlled techniques, got it?" Jake cracked his knuckles and smirked, clearly confident in his abilities. "No problem, Coach," he said, glancing at Danielle with a smug grin. "Let's see if Hollywood knows how to throw a punch." Danielle didn't say a word. She simply nodded, her expression unreadable. Her hands rose into a defensive position, steady, relaxed, and ready. Anyone who had trained long enough could tell she wasn't showing off or trying to intimidate anyone. There was something different about her stance. It wasn't flashy or aggressive. It was efficient, calculated, and grounded. But Jake didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. The coach stepped back and signaled for them to begin. Jake didn't waste a second. With a loud grunt, he lunged forward, aiming for a quick strike to Danielle's shoulder. His movements were fast but sloppy. To the untrained eye, it might have looked impressive, but those who knew better could see the gaps in his technique. Danielle moved like water. As Jake swung wildly, she sidestepped effortlessly, dodging his attack without breaking a sweat. Before he could recover, she countered with a sharp front kick aimed at his ribs. The impact landed cleanly, sending him stumbling backward. For a moment, Jake froze, shocked that someone had actually hit him, and hit him hard. A few snickers broke out among the students watching. Jake's face turned red, partly from embarrassment and partly from anger. "Lucky shot," he spat, glaring at Danielle. Without waiting for another signal, he charged again, this time throwing a flurry of punches and kicks. Each strike came faster than the last, but none of them connected. Danielle slipped through his attacks like smoke, staying just out of reach while maintaining perfect control. It became clear to everyone in the room that Jake was losing his cool. His breathing grew heavier, his movements more erratic. Every missed attempt only fueled his frustration. Meanwhile, Danielle remained calm and composed. Her focus never wavered. She wasn't fighting to hurt him. She was fighting to show him, and everyone else, that she belonged here. Then, in one swift motion, everything changed. Jake threw a wild roundhouse kick, leaving himself wide open. Danielle saw the opening immediately. In less than a heartbeat, she stepped inside his guard, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum against him. With a smooth sweep of her leg, she knocked him off balance and sent him crashing to the mat. Before he could react, she pinned him down. With an armbar, a move so precise and effective that even Coach Harris raised an eyebrow. The entire dojo fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Jake lay there, stunned, staring up at the ceiling as reality sank in. 14 seconds. That's all it took. 14 seconds to go from cocky senior student to flat on his back, utterly defeated. Danielle released her grip and stood up straight. She extended a hand to help Jake up, her expression neutral. There was no gloating, no smirk, no sign of triumph, just respect. But Jake slapped her hand away, scowling as he scrambled to his feet. "Whatever," he muttered under his breath, brushing himself off before storming toward the locker room without another word. For a moment, nobody moved. The other students exchanged glances, unsure of what to say or do. Then, slowly, murmurs began to ripple through the room. Some whispered words of admiration for Danielle's skill, while others couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. Even Coach Harris seemed taken aback, though he tried to hide it behind his usual stern demeanor. "All right, settle down," he barked, clapping his hands sharply to regain everyone's attention. "That's enough for today. Everyone hit the showers." As the students began filing out, several approached Danielle to congratulate her. One girl gave her a high five, saying, "That was insane." Another guy nodded approvingly, adding, "You totally owned him." For the first time since walking into the dojo, Danielle felt like she'd earned their respect, not because of her famous father, but because of her own strength and skill. But despite the applause and nods of approval, Danielle couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Jake's absence hung heavy in the air, a reminder that pride can be a dangerous thing. She knew he wouldn't forget what happened today, and neither would she. Still, as she packed up her gear and headed for the door, she allowed herself a small smile. Today was a victory not just over Jake, but over doubt, mockery, and fear. And deep down, she knew her dad would be proud. The next few days at the dojo were different. Word had spread quickly about what happened during that sparring session, and Danielle could feel the shift in how people treated her. Gone were the whispers and snickers. Instead, there was a newfound sense of respect, or at least curiosity. Some students who had previously ignored her now greeted her with nods or smiles, while others asked questions about her training. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was noticeable. Jake, however, remained absent. He hadn't shown up to practice since that day, which left an awkward void in the room. No one talked about him directly, but his absence was felt. The other students seemed unsure whether to bring it up, and Coach Harris didn't mention it either. Still, everyone knew something had changed, not just for Danielle, but for the entire dynamic of the dojo. On the third day after the incident, as Danielle was packing up her gear after class, she noticed Coach Harris lingering near the exit. His arms were crossed, and he looked like he was deep in thought. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should say goodbye or slip out quietly. Before she could decide, he spoke. "That move you pulled on Jake," he said, his voice gruff. but not unkind. Impressive. Danielle turned to face him, surprised by the compliment. Thank you, coach, she replied, keeping her tone modest. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. But I need to know something, he continued. Did your dad teach you that? The question caught her off guard, but only for a second. She shook her head firmly. No, sir. My dad taught me discipline and respect. I learned most of my techniques from years of practice and watching others. He didn't train me specifically for karate. I wanted to figure this out on my own. Coach Harris nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. Then, to her surprise, he gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. Good answer, he said. Look, I'll be honest with you. Jake's been a problem here for a while. Maybe seeing someone like you take him down will knock some sense into him, or maybe it won't. Either way, don't let him get to you. For the first time since joining the dojo, Danielle felt truly seen, not as Chuck Norris's daughter, but as herself. She smiled back, genuinely this time. Thank you, coach. The following week, Jake returned to the dojo. When he walked in, the room went eerily quiet. Everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to look at him, unsure of what to expect. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact as he made his way to the changing area. When he emerged in his GI, he avoided looking at Danielle altogether. Practice began as usual, but the tension in the air was palpable. During warm-ups, Jake stayed toward the back of the group, keeping his distance. At first, Danielle wondered if he'd drop out again, but he stuck it out, even participating in drills without complaint. It was clear he was trying to lay low, but the weight of what had happened still hung over him. Later that evening, after class had ended, Danielle was putting away her equipment when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Jake standing there, shifting uncomfortably from one foot to the other. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then, finally, he spoke. Hey, he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. About what happened. I guess I was being a jerk. Danielle raised an eyebrow, surprised by his admission. Yeah, you were. Jake chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Fair enough. Listen, I'm not saying we have to be friends or anything, but thanks for showing me that I still have stuff to learn. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Danielle could see the sincerity in his eyes, and she appreciated the effort it must have taken for him to swallow his pride and say those words. She nodded, accepting his apology. You're welcome, she said simply. And hey, we all have stuff to learn. That's why we're here, right? Jake managed a small smile before turning to leave. As he walked away, Danielle felt a strange sense of relief, not just for herself, but for him too. For the first time, she realized that Jake wasn't so different from her. Sure, he came across as arrogant and confrontational, but underneath it all, he was just another person trying to prove himself. And maybe, just maybe, their clash had been the wake-up call he needed. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Jake's attitude softened, and he started focusing more on improving his skills rather than posturing for attention. He still had moments of frustration, especially when he struggled with new techniques, but he handled them differently. Instead of lashing out or blaming others, he pushed through, determined to get better. Danielle and Jake even found themselves training together occasionally. At first it was awkward, with both of them unsure of how to act around each other. But as they worked side by side, they discovered a mutual respect. Jake admired Danielle's precision and control, while she appreciated his raw power and determination. Together they challenged each other to grow, pushing past their limits in ways neither of them had expected. Their relationship wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was real. They weren't friends in the traditional sense, but they understood each other in a way that went beyond words. Both of them carried scars from that day, but those scars became reminders of how far they'd come. As the weeks turned into months, the dojo itself began to feel different. The atmosphere shifted from one of tension and competition to one of camaraderie and growth. Students encouraged each other, celebrated victories, and supported each other through setbacks. Even Coach Harris seemed more relaxed. cracking jokes and offering advice with a warmth that hadn't been there before. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Danielle sat on the edge of the mat, wiping sweat from her brow. Jake plopped down beside her, groaning dramatically as he stretched his legs. "Man, I'm getting too old for this," he joked, earning a laugh from Danielle. "You're not that old," she teased, nudging him playfully. "Just stubborn." "Hey, watch it," he shot back, though there was no real bite to his words. They both laughed, the sound echoing softly in the empty dojo. For a moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching as the last rays of sunlight streamed through the windows. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both knew they were part of something bigger now, something stronger, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. Months had passed since that fateful sparring match, and the dojo felt like a completely different place. What once seemed like a battleground of egos and insecurities had transformed into something closer to a family. Students who used to compete, fiercely now trained together with smiles on their faces, cheering each other on during drills and offering tips when someone struggled. The air wasn't heavy with tension anymore. It was alive with energy, laughter, and shared purpose. Danielle noticed the change most in Jake. He'd gone from being the brash, overconfident troublemaker to someone who genuinely cared about improving, not just for himself, but for the team. Sure, he still cracked jokes and teased people, including Danielle, but there was no malice behind it. It was his way of connecting, of breaking the ice. And deep down, everyone knew he meant well. One evening after practice, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Coach Harris called everyone to gather around. His tone was serious, but there was a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "All right, listen up," he said, clapping his hands. "To get everyone's attention, you all know what's coming up next month, the annual tournament." A wave of murmurs rippled through the group. The annual tournament was a big deal. Dojos from across the state sent their best fighters to compete, and it was always a test of skill, endurance, and heart. For many of the students, this was their chance to prove themselves outside the safety of their own dojo. "This year," Coach Harris continued, "we're sending 5 competitors, and I want you all to step up your game if you're planning to try out. This isn't just about winning medals, it's about representing our dojo with pride." The room buzzed with anticipation. Some students exchanged nervous glances, while others grinned eagerly, already imagining themselves stepping onto the mat. Danielle felt a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling inside her. She hadn't joined the dojo to compete, but the idea of testing herself against fighters from other schools intrigued her. Plus, she couldn't deny the sense of pride that came with representing her team. Jake raised his hand hesitantly, drawing everyone's attention. "Coach," he began, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Do you think I'm ready for this?" The question caught everyone off guard. Jake wasn't exactly known for showing vulnerability, so hearing him admit doubt even indirectly was surprising. Coach Harris studied him for a moment before nodding. "You've come a long way, kid. If you put in the work these next few weeks, you'll have a shot. But it's not going to be easy." Jake nodded firmly, determination flashing in his eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, the dojo became a hive of activity. Students pushed themselves harder than ever, running extra laps, perfecting their techniques, and sparring late into the evenings. Danielle and Jake trained together almost every day, their partnership evolving into something unique. They weren't just teammates, they were mirrors for each other, reflecting strengths and weaknesses in ways that forced both of them to grow. During one particularly grueling session, Jake found himself struggling with a complex combination move. Frustration bubbled over as he missed the sequence again and again. "This is impossible," he groaned, throwing up his hands in defeat. Danielle stepped forward, her expression calm but encouraging. "It's not impossible. You're rushing it. Slow down and focus on one step at a time." He sighed heavily but nodded, following her advice. As they worked through the movement together, she offered gentle corrections, pointing out where he could adjust his stance or timing. By the end of the session, he finally nailed it, his face lighting up with triumph. "Yes," he shouted, punching the air. Then, turning to Danielle, he added, "Thanks. Seriously." She smiled, shrugging, modestly. "You did the work, I just helped." Moments like these became more frequent as the tournament approached. The bond between Danielle and Jake grew stronger, built on mutual respect and a shared goal. They weren't just training to win, they were training to be better versions of themselves. Finally, the day of the tournament arrived. The event was held in a large gymnasium packed with spectators, competitors, and coaches. The energy was electric, with cheers and shouts echoing off the walls. Danielle and Jake stood side by side near the entrance, watching as fighters from other dojos warmed up. Some looked intimidating, their confidence radiating like heat waves. Others seemed nervous, pacing back and forth or muttering under their breath. "You ready for this?" Jake asked, glancing at Danielle. She took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be." They made their way to the registration table, where Coach Harris was waiting with a clipboard. "Remember," he said, addressing the entire team, "stay focused, trust your training, and above all, respect your opponents. Win or lose, give it everything you've got." The first few rounds flew by in a blur. Danielle advanced steadily, her movements sharp and precise. She faced tough opponents, some of whom tested her limits, but she stayed calm under pressure, relying on the skills she'd honed over months of hard work. Jake also performed admirably, using his strength and newfound discipline to overpower his rivals. Watching him fight, Danielle couldn't help but feel proud. He wasn't the same person who'd mocked her on her first day. He was stronger, both physically and mentally. By the time the final round rolled around, the crowd was on its feet cheering wildly. To everyone's surprise, including their own, both Danielle and Jake had advanced far enough to face each other in the championship match. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Two people who had once clashed in anger were now standing toe-to-toe, as equals ready to give it their all. As they bowed to each other and took their positions, the noise faded away. All that mattered was the moment. Jake's expression was intense, his focus razor-sharp. Danielle mirrored him, her calm demeanor masking the adrenaline coursing through her veins. When the referee signaled for them to begin, they moved like lightning, exchanging strikes and counters with breathtaking speed. Every punch, kick, and block told a story, not just of their individual journeys, but of how far they'd come together. Neither gave an inch, pushing themselves to the limit. The match lasted longer than anyone expected, each fighter refusing to back down. In the end, neither emerged as the clear winner. It was declared a draw. As they bowed to each other, the crowd erupted into applause. Coach Harris stepped forward, clapping loudly. "That's how it's done," he shouted, earning cheers from the audience. For Danielle, the victory wasn't about trophies or titles. It was about proving herself, earning respect, and finding common ground with someone who had once doubted her. And somewhere deep inside, she knew her father would be proud. The final match between Danielle and Jake wasn't just a battle of skill. It was a culmination of everything they'd been through together. From the tension-filled days when Jake mocked her on her very first day at the dojo, to the countless hours they spent training side by side, every moment had led them here. As they stood facing each other in the center of the mat, the gymnasium buzzed with anticipation. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, holding their breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. When the referee signaled for the match to begin, both fighters moved with precision and intent. Jake came out strong, launching a series of powerful kicks and punches designed to overwhelm his opponent. His strategy was clear: use his raw strength to break through Danielle's defenses. But Danielle didn't flinch. She slipped past his attacks with ease, her movements fluid and calculated. Every time Jake lunged forward, she countered with a swift strike or a perfectly timed block, keeping him at bay. The audience watched in awe as the two fighters pushed each other to their limits. For every aggressive move Jake made, Danielle responded with calm efficiency. It wasn't about brute force for her. It was about timing, technique, and reading her opponent's next move. When Jake threw a spinning back kick, she ducked under it and delivered a sharp palm strike to his chest, sending him stumbling backward. He recovered quickly, but there was no mistaking the frustration building in his eyes. Jake's frustration only fueled his determination. He adjusted his approach, focusing more on defense while looking for openings in Danielle's guard. Their exchanges grew faster and more intense, each strike landing closer to its mark than the last. Sweat dripped down their faces and their breathing grew heavier, but neither showed any signs of backing down. They were evenly matched, not just in skill but in heart. As the clock ticked down, the tension in the room reached a fever pitch. With less than a minute left, Jake saw an opportunity and seized it. He feinted to the left, drawing Danielle's attention, then launched a high roundhouse kick aimed at her head. The crowd gasped as the kick sailed toward her, but Danielle reacted instantly. She raised her forearm to block the attack, deflecting the blow with a loud thud that echoed through the gymnasium. Before Jake could recover, she grabbed his leg mid-motion and used his momentum against him, sweeping her own leg beneath him. For the second time in their journey, Jake found himself flat on the mat. But this time, it felt different. There was no anger in his expression, only respect. As he lay there for a brief moment, catching his breath, he couldn't help but smile. He knew Danielle had beaten him fair and square, and he couldn't have asked for a better opponent. When the buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the match, the referee stepped between them and raised both of their hands in victory. The decision was unanimous. A draw. Neither fighter had earned enough points to claim outright victory, but everyone agreed that the match itself had been a triumph. The crowd erupted into applause, cheering not just for Danielle and Jake, but for the spirit of sportsmanship and mutual respect they had displayed. As they bowed to each other, the weight of what they'd accomplished settled over them. This wasn't just about winning or losing, it was about growth. Danielle had proven herself not only as a skilled martial artist, but also as someone who could rise above mockery and doubt. Jake had transformed from a brash troublemaker into a disciplined fighter capable of humility and self-reflection. Together, they had shown everyone in the room what true strength looked like. After the ceremony, where medals were handed out and photos were taken, the team gathered near the entrance to celebrate. Coach Harris stood at the center, beaming with pride. "I couldn't be prouder of all of you," he said, addressing the group. "You represented our dojo with honor today, and remember, this isn't the end, it's just the beginning." Danielle and Jake shared a glance, silently acknowledging how far they'd come since that awkward first day. Later, as they packed up their gear and prepared to leave, Jake approached her one last time. "Hey," he said, his voice softer, now almost shy. "Thanks for, well, everything. I wouldn't be where I am without you." Danielle smiled, shaking her head slightly. "We got here together. Remember?" He nodded, returning her smile. "Yeah, guess we did." Back at the dojo the following week, life returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could get after such an incredible experience. The tournament had brought the team closer than ever, and the lessons learned lingered long after the medals were put away. For Danielle, it reinforced why she had joined the dojo in the first place: to grow, to challenge herself, and to connect with others through the shared language of martial arts. One afternoon, as she sat on the edge of the mat, stretching, Coach Harris walked over and knelt beside her. "You know," he said, his tone thoughtful, "you remind me a lot of your dad." Danielle looked up, surprised by the comparison. "Really?" "Yeah," he replied with a chuckle. "Not because of the moves or the techniques, but because of the way you carry yourself. You've got his heart, that mix of toughness and kindness. It's rare." Her cheeks flushed with pride at the compliment. "That means a lot, Coach, thank you." As the sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light across the dojo floor, Danielle felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She hadn't set out to prove anything to anyone, not even to herself. All she wanted was to belong, to earn respect based on her own merits rather than her famous last name. And somehow, against all odds, she had done exactly that. But the journey wasn't over. Martial arts wasn't about reaching a destination, It was about embracing the process, learning from every experience, and striving to become better every single day. As she tied her belt and stood up to join the rest of the class, Danielle knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, with grit, grace, and the unwavering support of the people around her. The weeks following the tournament brought a new rhythm to the dojo. The excitement of the competition lingered in the air, but life slowly returned to its usual pace. Training sessions resumed, drills became more focused, and the camaraderie among the students grew stronger than ever. For Danielle, it felt like she had truly found her place, not just as a martial artist, but as part of something bigger. The dojo wasn't just a place to learn techniques, it was a community where everyone pushed each other to grow. One evening, after an intense sparring session, Coach Harris called everyone together for a quick meeting. He stood at the front of the room, his arms crossed and a thoughtful expression on his face. "All right, listen up," he began, his voice steady but warm. "You all did amazing at the tournament, but I want you to remember one thing. Tournaments are just milestones. They're not the end goal. The real test is how you carry yourself every single day, in here, outside these walls, and everywhere else." His words resonated deeply with Danielle. She thought back to everything she'd been through since joining the dojo, the doubts, the challenges, the victories, and realized that Coach Harris was right. What mattered most wasn't the medals or the accolades. It was the lessons learned along the way. It was about showing up, staying humble, and always striving to improve, not just in martial arts, but in life. As the team dispersed to pack up their gear, Jake approached Danielle again. Over the past few months, their relationship had shifted from rivalry to friendship, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. This time, though, he seemed unusually serious. "Hey," he said, stopping a few feet away. "I've been thinking about what Coach said, and I wanted to ask you something." Danielle raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's up?" "Well," he hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "I know I've got a long way to go before I can call myself a real martial artist, but if you don't mind, I'd like your help. You've got this calmness, you know, like nothing shakes you. I want to be like that." Her initial surprise quickly turned into a smile. "You already are," she replied honestly. "You've come so far since we first met. Remember how frustrated you used to get during practice? Now look at you. You barely even flinch when things get tough." Jake chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Yeah, but that's because of you. You didn't have to stick around and train with me, but you did, and I owe you for that." "You don't owe me anything," Danielle said firmly, meeting his gaze. "We're teammates. That's what we do. We lift each other up. Besides, you've helped me too, whether you realize it or not." He looked genuinely touched by her words. "Thanks," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." Over the next few months, the bond between Danielle and Jake continued to deepen. They trained harder than ever, pushing each other to new heights. Danielle introduced him to some of the principles her father had taught her, things like patience, balance, and mental focus. In return, Jake shared his own insights, teaching her how to harness raw power without losing control. Together, they became a formidable pair, inspiring others in the dojo to step up their game. But growth wasn't limited to just them. The entire team started thriving under Coach Harris's guidance. Students who had once struggled with basic techniques now executed advanced moves with confidence. Even those who weren't competing in tournaments found joy in simply being part of the group. The dojo had transformed into a space where everyone felt valued, supported, and motivated to be their best selves. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled outside the windows, Coach Harris announced a special training session. "Today," he said, pacing slowly in front of the class, "we're going to focus on something different, something that doesn't involve punches or kicks." The students exchanged puzzled glances. "What do you mean, Coach?" someone asked. "Mean mindset," he explained. "Martial arts isn't just about physical strength, it's about mental toughness. It's about learning to stay calm under pressure, to adapt when things don't go your way, and to keep moving forward no matter what. To illustrate his point, he paired everyone off and gave them a unique challenge: blindfold sparring. The idea was simple yet daunting. Each student would wear a blindfold and rely solely on instinct, hearing, and spatial awareness to defend themselves. At first, there were nervous laughs and hesitant movements, but as the exercise progressed, something remarkable happened. Without sight to guide them, the students tapped into a deeper level of focus. Every sound, every shift in weight, every breath became a clue. By the end of the session, even those who had initially doubted themselves were grinning ear to ear. "That was incredible," Jake exclaimed, pulling off his blindfold. "I've never felt so aware." "It's amazing what you can do when you trust yourself," Danielle added, nodding in agreement. Coach Harris watched them with a satisfied smile. "Exactly. Martial arts is as much about the mind as it is about the body. Never forget that." As winter approached, the dojo hosted its annual open house, an event designed to introduce newcomers to the world of martial arts. Parents and children filled the room, eager to learn more about the program. Danielle and Jake volunteered to demonstrate basic techniques, showcasing the discipline and teamwork that made their dojo unique. During a break, a young boy shyly approached Danielle. He couldn't have been older than 10, and his hands trembled slightly as he held out a pen and paper. Could you sign this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Caught off guard, Danielle hesitated for a moment. Then, realizing what he was asking, she smiled warmly. "Of course," she said, signing her name with a flourish. As she handed the paper back, she added, "And hey, if you decide to join us, I'll see you on the mat." The boy's face lit up with excitement, and he ran back to his parents, chattering animatedly. Watching the scene unfold, Jake nudged Danielle playfully. "Looks like you've got a fan," she laughed, shaking her head. "It's not about fame or recognition. It's about inspiring others to try something new, to believe in themselves." "And you're really good at that," Jake replied. "Sincerely, you make people feel like they belong." By spring, the dojo had grown significantly. New faces joined the ranks, bringing fresh energy and enthusiasm. Danielle took on a mentorship role, helping beginners develop their skills and build confidence. Seeing the progress of younger students reminded her of her own journey, how far she'd come since that rocky first day. One afternoon, as she sat on the edge of the mat watching a group of kids practice, Coach Harris plopped down beside her. "You've done good, Danny," he said, his tone proud. "Your dad would be proud too." Danielle felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thank you, Coach, that means a lot." He nodded, then gestured toward the bustling room. "This place wouldn't be the same without you. You've set an example for everyone here, not just with your talent, but with your attitude. You've shown them what it means to lead with humility and heart." As she glanced around the dojo, taking in the laughter, the determination, and the sense of unity, Danielle knew she had found her purpose. Martial arts wasn't just about mastering techniques or winning matches. It was about connection, growth, and making a difference in the lives of others. And somewhere deep inside, she knew her father would agree.